Alright, what's going on everyone? I'm SomeDevNamedSteve and welcome to the second part of this Let's Make tutorial for Hello Unity, just a very basic game to get the ball rolling with learning about Unity and game development. So, what I have here is just the very basics of the game. I have just the very basic scene. But what I want to do is, before I get into the scripting and showing how to make a character move and jump and all of that, I want to put another platform in the center for this big platform to hold the larger collectible to win the game. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move over here and I'm going to just make another copy of the sub-platform. I could do that as I did before by just clicking this, dragging and dropping, but another way to copy an object is you can just click on the game object, hold down Control, and then press D, and then you have the copy that was just made. So I'm going to move this in the center here, and I'm going to make this a different color. I'm going to make it cyan. So I'm going to go back to my materials, I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to create material, and I'm going to make cyan. And I'm also going to make this platform a little bigger on the side. I'm going to scale it up to 4, and that's going to be the larger platform. Now that I have this, I'm going to make the actual player object. So what I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to right click in here, I'm going to create a 3D object, I'm going to create a capsule in this case. So we can't see it, but it is there. We're just going to center it. But first I'm also going to move this back and move it up a little bit. And with respect to the camera, it looks perfectly good. If you don't have it looking exactly like this and you want to have it look like this, all you have to do is just move the camera back and up a little bit from where it originally was. So now that I have the actual player object, I'm going to right click and then I'm going to create another material. I'm going to do blue, and then I'm going to just drag drop, and then that's how the player is going to look for this game. And then I'm also going to change the name from capsule to player. So if you click on capsule and then in the inspector up here, I'm just going to change it to player. So now that I have the player completely set up, I'm going to add a component, which is essentially another feature that a game object has. And I'm going to add what's called a rigid body. And a rigid body is just something that can help it move with gravity. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to add component, I'm going to go to physics, and I'm going to go click on rigid body. Now, this just has everything. So how heavy is the object? Does it have any kind of drag, linear drag or angular drag? Does it use gravity? Is it kinematic? All that kind of stuff. The only things that we're going to be focusing on is that we have to make sure that use gravity is checked. And then I want to freeze the rotation in the X, the Y, and the Z axes. So that means that this player is not rotating at all. It's going to be staying exactly as it is, although we are going to be moving it forward, back, left, and right. So now that we have everything set up for pre-scripting, now we can get to the actual scripting. So I'm going to click on Assets, double click on Scripts. I'm going to right click, create a C# script. Everything I do is going to be in C#. I'm going to call it Player Movement. Nothing too difficult. The only thing is that you have to make it one word, or else it won't necessarily be understood by the compiler. So if you do player underscore movement, that's fine because it accepts that as one word or a string encoding. So now that I have this set up, I'm going to go to edit up here and preferences, and I'm going to show you how to set up Visual Studio. Now, you click external tools and you have external script editors. So for the script editors, you have Visual Studio, and you also have MonoDevelop. I know that Visual Studio you can obviously get separately, but I know that you can use it now in other versions of Unity. So anything from Unity 5.3 or 5.2, I think. I know that this version is 5.3, but you're able to do it in 5.2 if I remember correctly. So you're just going to click the drop down, then make sure Visual Studio 2013 is clicked. If you don't have Visual Studio 2013, I'm going to put a link in the description down below for that. And that's the very basic setup. So now that I double clicked on it, I'm just going to wait for the scripting environment to come up. And as shown, the scripting environment has come up completely perfect. So now to just explain what everything is in here. So using Uni Engine, this means that you're using a specific library or namespace, and you're using another one called system.collections. You just have to know that these are the very basic ones that you absolutely need for Unity. Now to go over what all this is. So just to start out, I'm going to first add comments. The first comment I'm going to do is I'm just going to do my name. I'm going to say SomeNerdNamedSteve. Then I'm going to say what the script is. I'm going to say playerMovement.cs, and then I'm going to write the objective, where the objective of this script is to show how the player moves about a scene. So nothing really too difficult. You just have 2 slashes, and then you can add your comment. And now to just get into everything else, I'm also going to add one up here for library imports. And because these are the libraries, as I said, you're going to be using in Unity. And you're also able to add more in the future, which I will show you how to do that. Before I get into actually writing code, I'm just going to put a comment up here and say beginning of class for player movement. And then down here, I'm just going to make one that says end class. And now I'm going to describe what's going on with everything here. So public, that means any class can access the script if need be. Class, it's just an area where code is. Player movement is just the name of the actual class. The colon here means that this script is taking from another script. So in this case, this script is taking from another one called MonoBehavior, which is a script from within Unity engine. So that means if you're using a specific namespace, you're able to use all the classes from within it. And for example, this one is showing the MonoBehavior script from the Unity engine. So now I'm going to just start out by making a few variables. I'm going to say private float, not float speed, where float is essentially just a decimal number, is equal to 5. And anytime you use a float, you have to have this F at the end. So I'm just going to add a comment up here that says this denotes the speed for player movement. Now that I have this, I'm going to make a public variable where that public variable is going to be a rigid body. So now I can get the rigid body from the player. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say rigid body variable taken from player. And I'm just going to say public rigid body RB. Now I'm actually going to get the player movement. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get the rigid body. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go into the start function, which it says up here, use this for initialization. Anytime that you start a scene, Unity will call this function and it will call another function, awake, which I will get into in a later video. But for now, we can only use the start as that's the main one needed. So I'm just going to say here, RB is going to be equal to get component. I cannot type today. And I'm going to just put rigid body inside of less than and greater than symbols. Now what this means is it's called something called a generic, which you get that from collections, which is why that class is needed. But I'm not going to get into exactly what a generic is, just going to show that it's needed. So I'm going to say this line gets the rigid body. It gets the rigid body given from the Unity editor. So this is going to get whatever rigid body we gave it inside the Unity editor. So we're going to be giving the player rigid body, which means that's the rigid body associated with this variable. Now I'm going to get into the update function. What the update function does is that it will update once per frame. So if you're running a game at 60 frames per second, you're going to be having this function called 60 times. So inside of this update function, I'm going to say if the player is moving forward or if the player is moving back, left or right. So I'm just going to start out by saying if input dot, I can do it with axes or I can do it with keys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say get key and then key code dot W. So in this case, if W is pressed, the player is going to move forward. So I'm going to say if W is pressed, the player moves forward. And here, inside this, I'm going to say transform.translate and then I'm going to multiply my speed times vector 3. So essentially just a direction in a 3D space. And in this case, it's going to be forward. So vector 3 dot forward. And I'm just going to copy this a couple times, and then I'm going to paste it there. I'm going to paste it there, and I'm going to paste it there. And I'm just going to basically change values now. So we know that W will move forward, and in this case, S will move back, as in WASD movements. So in this case, we know the player will move back if S is pressed. So in this case, you need to do speed times vector 3 dot back. Now I'm just going to go and do left and right here. So for left, we know it's going to be A. So if A is pressed, the player will be moving to the left. And I'm going to change this vector 3 to dot left. And then I also have D here, which is going to be the player moving right. So I'm going to say right. I'm going to change this comment to D. And then I'm going to say vector 3 dot right. So I just saved the script here by pressing Control S. And I'm going to go into Unity here. And I'm going to test the script out. Where so far, I know it's going to fail because I didn't include any kind of rigid body. So if I click here, I also know I didn't include the script. So I'm going to just press the script. I'm going to go to player. I'm going to take the script, drag, and drop. And then I'm going to see that there's a rigid body component. I'm just going to add my player rigid body. And now I'm going to press play and test it. So now just to see if I'm moving forward, I moved forward. I moved to the left. I moved off of the screen though. So I'm going to just double check that. I'm going to just comment out my speed, or take my speed out. So I'm going to comment that out. And then I'm also going to just take this out. I'm going to take the speed out of here just to see how it'll work. And I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to go back, test it, and see how fast I'm moving. So as you can see, I am moving, and I moved off the board, but I'm moving kind of fast. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to bring my speed back. So I'm just going to take this, I'm going to copy it, I'm going to paste it again everywhere here, here, and here. It says that there is no speed, but I know there is. I just commented it out right here. And I'm going to change this to 0.25. I'm going to make it a very small number just so I know that it's manageable. So I can see that if I test it now after moving, I'm able to move a lot slower now. And also the movement is pretty spot on. So I'm going to press W, let go. Press D, let go. Press S, let go. Press A, let go. All of that. So that means that we know our player is moving, and they're moving in a fairly regular fashion. Although it's still kind of fast, so I'm just going to make it a little slower by saying point. Let's see. Let's cut this in half. 1, 2, 5. A lot of programming is also a lot of testing just to see, okay, am I going to be able to use this value? Is this going to be good for the end user? If so, how will it be beneficial? Where I'm going to leave the speed at a much lower value. I'm going to say 0.05. Save that, and I'm just going to see how good that is. I know I don't need to move super fast because this isn't exactly a large area. So now I'm moving, yeah, so this is a little slow, but it helps show where I'm going to be going. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and show how to make you jump. So I'm going to just make a region really quick. So the way you can make a region in C# is I'm just going to say hash region, and I'm going to say player movement, or I'm just going to say WASD, just so I know that this is the movement. And then down here, I'm going to say hash end region. So now what I'm able to do is that I'm able to collapse all this code, and it'll make it a lot easier to work with. So now I know, and I know that this is WASD movement, so I'm just going to write comments up here saying this region shows movement using on using WASD. Now I'm going to show how to jump. So I'm just going to say this region shows jumping. Yeah, it shows jumping for the player. So the player, when you jump, you're just going to be essentially moving up with some kind of force. So I'm just going to say hash region again, and I'm going to say jump, and then I'm going to end the region. So we know that we can just add all the code in here. So inside this region here, I'm going to show how to make the player jump. When you jump up, you move with a certain force. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if input.getKey, but not just get key in this case, get key down, because if I'm holding, in this case, if I have get key, if I'm holding that, holding down a certain key, the player is going to just keep going up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if input.getKey down key code dot space. So if I'm pressing the space bar, so if pressing the space bar jump, and inside of brackets here, I am going to say rb.addForce, and you need to add force in a certain direction. So I'm just going to start out, not going to do anything crazy. I'm just going to say vector3.up. I'm just going to see how far I get with that. So I save the script, I add it back into Unity, and then I press play. And as you can see, I'm not exactly moving up that much when I press the space bar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply it by a number. So let's say that I multiply it by 20, just to see what happens. So what I'm going to do is I save the script. You'll know if the script is saved or not by a star. A star means that there's a change. So I'm going to press play again. And I'm just going to move left, right, forward, back. And I'm not really moving too much, although you can see I'm moving a very small amount. If you look in the inspector up here, you can see it changing very, very slightly. So I'm going to make this value, I'm going to get out of play test mode. Going to go back to Visual Studio. I'm going to change it to 350. I just put the number straight in, 350. So now I'm just going to clean this up a bit by that, and then I'm going to close this. And that's the basics of player movement. Now that I have this done, I'm going to go ahead, save this script. I'm going to minimize this, not close it. And I'm going to make another script. I'm going to do camera movement. So I'm going to create C# script, and I'm going to call this one camera movement. And I'm going to just initially start off by adding this to the camera. If I can click on this. No, just click on camera, then drag, drop. You have that in. So now I'm going to just open it up in Visual Studio. Now I have my camera movement script up. So what I'm going to do is that I want to be able to just have the camera trace behind the player. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to start off by creating the game object for the player. So I'm going to just put my usual comments up here first. Okay, so now that I added just my usual comments, the header, comment, the library imports, and then the beginning and end of the class. What I'm going to do now is that I'm going to add a game object just to declare it. So I'm going to say here public game object. And in this case, I'm going to say player just to make it descriptive. And to add the comment, I'm going to say this will be the game object we are tracking. So game object we are tracking. And then I'm going to have a private vector3 called offset or displacement. So what I'm going to do here is that this gets the player position, and then this one will get the displacement for the camera being behind it. So what I'm going to say gets camera displacement from player. And now inside of my start function, I'm going to say offset is equal to, or not offset, sorry, displacement is going to be equal to transform.position, where in this case the this right here means the position of the object associated with the script. So this is going to be the camera's position, minus the player's position. So player.transform.position. So this will just instantly get the position of the camera and the player. And now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to change this update function a bit. I'm going to do something called late update. So update is called once per frame, but what makes it different is that late update will be called when the physics engine needs it to. So late update is called when physics engine is needed. So what I'm going to do in here is that I'm just going to say transform.position. So I'm going to say transform.position is going to be equal to player.transform.position plus offset or displacement. What this will do is that this will just trace behind the player in the most basic way. So it'll just stay behind the player where we originally set it. So now that we have this set up, I'm just going to add a comment here saying that this will track movement and replace the camera when needed. So that's what late update's going to do. And then this is going to create the displacement vector with respect to the player. So now I'm just going to save by doing Control S. I'm going to go back to my Unity editor and I'm going to just test everything now. So I'm going to play test. And right now I don't have anything on it because I don't have anything associated with the player game object. So if I go to main camera here, player, there's nothing there. So I'm just going to drag and drop right there. And now the player is associated with that script. So if I click play, I'm going to notice that it doesn't exactly have it perfect. So now I'm just going to try and figure out why. Everything else works perfectly. It traces behind the player absolutely perfectly. And I can just jump, and I'm able to jump up. I'm able to go to different platforms. And just going to move it here. Now I'm going to try and figure out why. So the camera is up here, but the player's here, and then the camera comes all the way down here. So let's go back to the script. So what I'm going to do is I by accident saw the typo. I'm going to say minus that, and then I saved it, and now the camera should be in the same exact place. So now if I have movement, I can just move forward, back, left, right, any which way, and I can jump properly without having the camera being in a different place. Okay, so that's going to be the very basis of this tutorial. In the next one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show how to make a collectible object and how to collect them, and then show how to make a larger object in the final video or the fourth video. But in the next one, I'm going to be talking all about collisions, and I'm going to be showing how to work with them and then how to count them as well. So thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and subscribe, because I'm going to be finishing this one. I'm going to be doing a lot more other than this. And then also every script that I worked on here and other scripts are going to be on GitHub. And the final product of this is going to be on GameJolt. So thanks for watching. I'm SomeDevNamedSteve. This was Hello Unity Part 2, and I'm going to be seeing you in the next video.